So there was an occasion when it was some celebration, traditional celebration. So the chief minister was there, the place was crowded, everybody in his seat, with only one throne empty for the king to come. So then in walks a raggedly dressed, badly dressed Sufi, walks straight to the throne and sits there. Everybody is flabbergasted. The chief minister is enraged. So the chief minister goes to me, he says, "Get up from there." He says, "Why?" He said, "I am the chief minister and you are not even a minister." So I said, "Oh, minister, I'm more than that." So he says, "More than a minister, and I am the chief minister." So the chief minister, I'm more than that. So he said, "You are certainly not the king." "King?" He said, "I'm more than that." So he said, "Are you God?" So he said, "God? Oh, I'm more than God." So the chief minister said, "More than God? There's nothing." So he said, "Quite right, I am that nothing." And the wonderful part is that all of us can say the same thing. We are nothing. And what is more, quantum mechanics, the physicist, quantum physicist will confirm it. He said the human beings are an insignificant aspect of the quantum flux. The mystic may say cosmic flux. Seething particles in an ocean of seething particles, which also means nothing. And just that bit, if it is remembered, but that is not, the ego won't allow you to remember that. And that is why all the unhappiness. There is another story. The story of another, this time, well, I won't be partial. So the first time it was a Sufi, this time it's a rabbi. So there was a rabbi whose regular routine was to come out of his residence, visit a number of people, took him a couple of hours, then come back to his residence. He was new there, so the local policeman didn't know him. All he saw was someone coming out of his residence, going about for a while and coming back, probably with something which he didn't have in his hand when he left. So the policeman stopped him one morning and he said, "Rabbi, where are you going?" So the rabbi said, "I don't know." The policeman was angry. He said he was insulting him. So he took him and locked him up for a couple of hours and then let him go. So when he was leaving, the rabbi tells the policeman, "You see, I didn't know. I didn't know you were going to lock me up." So this "I don't know" is literally correct. Nobody really knows what is going to happen next. Nobody really knows in his life what is going to happen next. Same thing happened once. When at my guru's place, there was one man who used to come occasionally and listen to Maharaj. And Maharaj's usual thing was this: nobody really knows, nobody is a doer. Everything just happens. Nobody has any volition. And there was this man And he thought it was just this teaching of Maharaj which has made the average Hindu such a weakling. So he, a Hindu, had got himself converted to a Sikh. They are the militant race in India. So he grew up his hair, started a beard, wore the steel kada, and it was quite a sight. He was even smaller than I am. And the Sikhs are big people. Anyway, he interrupted Maharaj once. And Maharaj, you said, this is what has happened. It is because of teaching that you are teaching that the Hindus have become weak. Maharaj let him talk. So then he said, Maharaj, if I came tomorrow with half a dozen people with sticks and started beating you up, what will you do? And Maharaj said, I don't know. Maharaj's room was quite small, where people gathered. So at any time, there were hardly more than 8 or 10 people. On Sundays, maybe 15, 16 people. It was a small room, 20 people at the most. So there were about 8 or 10 people. And when he said, seriously, he said, I don't know. Everybody laughed. But for some reason, I kept looking at him. So Maharaj asked me, you're not laughing. Didn't you think it was funny? So I said, Maharaj, I don't know whether it was funny or not. But to me, what you just said was the most accurate statement I could have ever heard. Maharaj looked at me, nodded. He knew what I meant. But the others didn't know. Many of them were foreigners. I mean, many out of the 7 or 8. So they said, what's going on between you and Maharaj? And Maharaj was not a mild man like me. He was a fierce old man. So nothing happened unless he had given his okay. So I looked at Maharaj. Maharaj said, all right, meaning explain to them. But I had a deep feeling Maharaj really wanted to test whether I knew what he thought I knew. So I told them, when Maharaj says, I don't know, your question to Maharaj was as an individual. In certain given circumstances, what would you do as an individual? But in the case of Maharaj, there is no individual doer. So his question, I don't know, was interpreted as an individual saying, I don't know what I shall do in the given circumstances. But that is not what Maharaj meant. In the absence of an individual doer, what Maharaj meant was, I don't know what will happen. He didn't mean, I don't know what I shall do. He knows well enough there is no individual doer. So he said, I don't know what will happen. And what is more, what may happen tomorrow morning in certain given circumstances may not happen in identical circumstances next morning. Because whatever happens will happen according to the will of God or the cosmic law. Maharaj didn't know English. But when I explained to him at length, usually if Maharaj had any doubt, he would ask the translator, what did you say? Then he had to explain. And then he would say, all right. Or he would say, no. that is not what I said. So this time he didn't ask. He knew that what was said was true. And the others understood it. That what is going to happen in certain given circumstances, nobody really knows. So what the answer usually is, in such and such circumstances, this is what I would do. And this, what I would do, depends on what he thinks the personality would do. And there, I remember reading a particular case during one of the wars. A young army man, a captain, or 3 generations of soldiers behind him. And he, 21, 22-year-old lad, was just waiting for a battle, just waiting for a chance to show how good a soldier he was, with 3-4 generations of soldiering behind him. It was an American soldier. So, during the war, at the crucial moment of when the battle was raging, this young soldier with 4 generations of soldiering behind him suddenly got panicky and he ran away. And his next in command had to take over. And next in command did very well. But he also had a sense of loyalty, and he didn't betray his senior officer. But the senior officer knew that at least one man knew that he had run away. So he persecuted him and had him thrown out. But the point I'm making is that a soldier who was looking forward to a battle didn't dream that what would happen could happen. So one really doesn't know what exactly will happen. Why? Because there is truly no me to be able to do anything. In the absence of the ego, what is a human being? The Pulitzer Prize-winning writer, John Franklin. The John is J-O-N, John Franklin. I don't know how many years ago. But he has put it better than anybody else could have done it. He says, the human being is a human mechanism. But there is a mechanism in the human mechanism which prevents the human mechanism from seeing its mechanistic nature. In the human mechanism, there is a mechanism which prevents the human mechanism from seeing its mechanistic nature. In other words, that mechanism in the human mechanism is the ego, with a sense of personal doership. So the ego, with a sense of personal doership, always imagines that it is he or she who is doing whatever it is. And it's so difficult to accept, even from personal experience. I think it's anybody's experience. All he or she has to do, think over some time whatever has happened. And in most cases, the experience itself is that things have happened. That is the experience. And yet that experience is not taken into account. Because that is the mechanism which prevents the human mechanism from seeing its mechanistic nature. In fact, I say if you had to tell someone what you did on a specific occasion some time ago, the chances almost 100% are that you will begin by saying, at such and such a time, on such and such an occasion, it so happened that. That's how you will begin. It so happened that I was at such a place doing such and such a thing. So the very fact that you begin by saying, it so happened that, spontaneously you have uttered the truth. So my point is that any action that happens is truly not anyone's action, but it is a happening. And according to my concept, self-realization or enlightenment is frankly nothing more, I repeat, according to my concept, nothing more than the total, absolute acceptance, not just intellectual acceptance, but the deepest possible acceptance that every action is a divine happening or a happening according to the cosmic law, but not something done by anyone. For me, that is the enlightenment. Other than that, for my concept, there is nothing like enlightenment. And any other wild expectation of the enlightenment of self-realization is a total misconception. That is all that self-realization means. I am not the doer, but along with it, there is no one else who is the doer either, which is more important. You see? Now, what is it that one is looking for? Spiritual seeking, what is it all about? I ask that I'm sorry? Okay, thank you. What is it that one is looking for? In Bombay, when people come, I ask this quite often. Usually the answer is enlightenment. So I ask, why do you want enlightenment? And the honest answer very often is, I don't know. I don't know. But there was one person, a management man, who is used to being practical. He said, I've often asked myself this question, what am I really looking for in life? I don't consider myself a spiritual seeker, but I have found, definitely from experience, mine and others, that mere money or wealth does not bring what I want. I was delighted. Here was someone who knew exactly what he wanted. So he said, after thinking about it, I came to the conclusion, a very simple conclusion. I want to be comfortable with myself. What do I want out of life? I want to be comfortable with myself. And I know that I cannot be comfortable with myself if I am not comfortable with others. You see? I want to be comfortable with myself, and I know that I cannot be comfortable with myself unless I'm comfortable with others. So I said, have you done any more research on the subject? He said, no, my research stops there. So my question still is, this man said, how can I be comfortable with myself and with others? So the ball was squarely in my court. So I said, I have a very simple answer for it. If this sense of personal doership which you do have, don't you consider that everyone does whatever actions happen through that body, mind, organ, you and everybody else? He said, yes. So I said, that is the reason you are not comfortable with yourself, because you are not comfortable with all the actions that you think you have done. There are many actions which you don't think you should have done. Therefore, you are not comfortable with yourself. And you are not comfortable with others for the same reason. You think what others have done, they should not have done. So I said, would you agree with that? So he said, yes. Then I said, let me put it another way. Would you say that you are comfortable with yourself and you are comfortable with others in your deep sleep? So he said, now that you asked me, yes. In deep sleep, there is not this problem of being uncomfortable with either me or with others, because there are no others in deep sleep. So I said, what you're really trying to get is that kind of happiness. More appropriately, I would call, you're trying to get that kind of peace in the waking state which prevails in deep sleep. So he said, yes. So I said, what is the one main difference between what happens in deep sleep or in your personal dream and the waking state? The difference is surely one thing. There is a personal doer in the waking state, and there is no personal doer in your deep sleep state. So, I said, my firm conviction is that you will get the peace which prevails in deep sleep if you can have the total conviction that you are not the doer of any actions which happen through your body, mind, organism, nor is anyone else the doer of actions which happen through his or her body, mind, organism. So I said, in order to understand that, your question would be, if the human being is not the doer, what is a human being? That will be your question. So he says, how did you know? So I've had people like you before. That's why I know. So I said, leave the ego out. And what is a human being? Leave the ego out with a sense of personal doership. And what remains? What remains is a body-mind organism with its own nature, with its own inherent nature. In other words, without the ego with a sense of personal doership, the human being is merely a body-mind object. Nothing more than a body-mind object. One object, one species of object, which together with thousands of other species of objects in land, air and water, millions and millions of species of objects, which together constitute the manifestation. What is the manifestation? Nothing more than a collection of objects. The manifestation to me is nothing more than a collection of objects, thousands and thousands of species of objects on land, air and water. So the human being is one species of object. So uniquely programmed, each human being is so uniquely programmed that at any moment a particular action will happen, an action will be brought about by the creator or the source or consciousness, as the Upanishads say, or the primal energy, as the scientists would like to say, which brings out specific actions at a specific moment in a specific place through a specific body-mind object. Because each human object is uniquely programmed. And the primal energy or the source or God, whatever you call the source, functions through every human object, bringing about that which is supposed to happen through each human object at that moment. Precisely like electricity brings about that through every electrical gadget, which each electrical gadget is designed to produce. The only difference is the electrical gadget does not have an ego to say, it is my action. I produce the light. I produce the breeze. I produce the mixture. So I said, according to my concept, this is what the human being is without the ego with a sense of personal doership. A mere object. And at this point, let me mention two things. One, at this point, the usual question is, Ramesh, you're not serious, are you? Are you serious in telling us that there is no individual doer, that no one has any volition? Can you imagine the state of world where no one has any personal volition? Can you imagine the chaos that will result if each individual being does not have volition to do what he thinks should be done? So my answer to that is, I have no idea of the chaos that will be produced, but I do know the chaos that has been produced by the human beings with the idea that they are doing whatever is done. So what is the state the world is in? Wonderful harmony or almost total chaos? So I say, with my concept, you can at least say that the human being is not responsible for the chaos that exists. The human being is not the doer. So if the human being is not the doer, how does the source produce specific action at a specific time? The second thing, and this is the first thing, the second thing I wanted to stress was, whatever I have been saying and whatever I shall say will be a concept. I usually mention this even earlier in a talk, because as I keep on talking, your intellect will say, this seems crazy, but it appeals to my logic. It doesn't go against my logic. I feel compelled to accept it. But how do I know what Ramesh is saying is the truth? Therefore, I confess right in the beginning that what I am saying is not the truth. It is only a concept. A concept is an opinion, an idea, which some people may accept, some people may not. Whereas the truth is something no one can deny. That is my definition of the truth and a concept. Truth is something which no one can deny. A concept is something which people can deny. And therefore, on this basis, whatever any sage has said at any time, whatever any scripture of any religion has said at any time, is a concept. No sage has ever said any truth. The only truth, therefore, according to my concept again, is the impersonal awareness of being. I am. I exist. Not as Ramesh or Thomas or John or Muhammad, but impersonally I am. So that impersonal awareness of being, I am is the only truth. And I understand that Moses or Abraham, my Bible knowledge is very poor, asked God, what are you? And he said, God is supposed to have said, I am that I am. Meaning, I am is all that can be said. Anything, any further explanation would be a concept. I am that I am. That is all that can be said. So this impersonal awareness, which no one can deny, an atheist may come to me and say, Ramesh, look, I've studied the subject for 20 years. I've got a doctorate in comparative religions. And I'm convinced that God does not exist. So I would say, all right, let us assume God does not exist. Can you deny that you exist? So this impersonal awareness of existence, impersonal awareness of being, I am, is the only truth. Is the only truth in phenomenality. Before the phenomenal manifestation came into being, let us call it the noumenal state. In that noumenal state, nobody needed any truth. The necessity for truth comes only in phenomenality. Therefore, in phenomenality, the only truth I have is the impersonal awareness of being. But in the functioning of phenomenality, in the functioning of manifestation, life as we know it, according to me, there is one other truth in the functioning of phenomenality. And that is Nothing can happen unless it is the will of God. Again, the 4 words in the Bible. Thy will be done. And take it from me, exactly the same thing with different words exist in every religion. In the Hindu religion, the words are perhaps a little more specific. The Bible says, thy will be done. The Hindu religion says, thou art the doer and thou art the experiencer. Thou art the doer and thou art the experiencer. Something similar in the Muslim Mohammedan religion, which says, God is all there is. So if we accept that God is all there is, and you call it the source, then obviously nothing possibly could happen unless it is the will of that source. It's really so simple. Thy will be done, or thou art the doer and thou art the experiencer, really doesn't need any interpretation. But interpretations have been made by interpreters throughout the history of mankind, and therefore we have had religious wars. Interpretations are concepts, and interpretations differ. So, as far as I am concerned, I repeat, according to my concept, the moment I talk about I am, the impersonal awareness, make no mistake, it has already become a concept. The moment anyone begins to talk about the impersonal awareness, it has become a concept. Thy will be done is still a concept. Therefore, I am keen on confessing that if your intellect would be quite right in saying what Ramesh says seems logical. And as you go further, the intellect will be even more satisfied. When I tell the intellect asks me, the ego asks me, I am talking with the ego. I know that. Therefore, I am not telling the ego to forget the ego. That is what is generally done. The ego is the problem. Destroy the ego. I've never found anything more amusing than the human being being asked to get rid of the ego. What makes the human being human is the ego, the sense of personal doership. So the ego says, are you telling me, Ramesh, that if the sense of personal doership is gone, if I am able to accept totally that I am not the doer, everything happens because it is the will of God, then I shall be comfortable with myself and I shall be comfortable with others. I would say, yes, if you are able to accept totally, unconditionally, absolutely, that no one is a doer, that all actions that happen are divine happenings or happenings according to the cosmic law, no individual is responsible for his actions. If that is totally acceptable, then you will be comfortable with yourself and you will be comfortable with others. And the answer is to the question, how can that be? The answer is, only answer truly is, try it. Try it But this conviction, the total conviction, the happening of that total conviction is again, according to the basic concept, the total acceptance is not in your control. You may want to have that acceptance, but if it is not the will of God, or according to the cosmic law, that a particular person, a particular ego is not supposed to have that acceptance will not happen. So the total acceptance of this, how does that, what difference, what tremendous difference does it make in your life? That is the question. The answer is this. The Buddha has put it beautifully. He said, samsara is dukkha. Samsara by its very nature, by its very essence, samsara, life, by its very essence, is unhappiness. The Buddha didn't mention happiness because the share of unhappiness in most cases is much larger than the share of happiness. So Buddha accepted the little happiness that happens and concentrated on the unhappiness, the misery. So the Buddha said, samsara is dukkha, life is misery, and nirvana is shanti. But he added, they are not two. He said, you have to get the shanti of nirvana, the peace of nirvana, the peace of deep sleep, even while living your life in samsara. They are not two. So he made it perfectly clear. Life's misery cannot be avoided. That is, life is misery. The essential part of life is a substantial amount of misery. And yet, you can accept that misery. That was the assurance of the Buddha. You can accept that misery and still have the peace of nirvana. And my suggestion to you is that just this acceptance, one acceptance, I am not the doer, nor is anyone else the doer. The doing happens, no one is a doer, will bring this peace of nirvana while living and accepting the misery of the world. So how does that happen? Buddha, I think, I'm not sure about this, but he makes a difference between misery and suffering. Misery is for the body-mind organism. The suffering is for the ego. The ego who does not accept the misery of life suffers. The ego who accepts the suffering of misery without the sense of doership does not suffer. So the question is, how does that happen? And my answer is this. If you are able to accept, let's take the case of a conceptual sage. A sage enjoys the peace of nirvana while living in life and accepting the misery. So what happens in the case of a sage? In the case of a sage, there is total acceptance that he is not the doer of actions which happen through that his body-mind organism. So, an action happens through his body-mind organism. Actions happen all the time. You cannot say, if I have no volition, why should I do anything? You are not doing anything anyway. It is the energy functioning through each human body-mind mechanism which produces the action. So you can't even say, if I am not the doer, why should I do anything? And when this argument comes about, if I am not the doer, why should I get up in the morning at all? Why shouldn't I spend the day in bed doing nothing? And the basis of this argument is that the action which the argument holds is only physical action. But action is not physical. Most actions are mental. So I would tell this man, try being in bed even 2 hours more than you can, and you will notice actions happening feverishly. Not physical actions, but mental actions. They'll be happening all the time. So, an action happens through a body-mind organism of a sage. And let us say, for the sake of comparison, similar action happens through an ordinary person. Where is the difference? The same action is approved by society. The society says that action was a magnificent action. That person should be honored and rewarded. So the acceptance of the society is an input in this uniquely programmed body-mind organism. This uniquely programmed computer, if you like. In both cases, in both body-mind computers, the input is praise and acceptance from society. To that input the brain reacts, and there is an output, which is a sense of pleasure. So, in both body-mind organisms, the sages and the ordinary person, the acceptance of the society produces a sense of pleasure, perhaps even a sense of gratification. But that sense of pleasure or gratification is a mechanical or biological reaction in a programmed body-mind organism. And to this extent, it is the same in both, whether in the case of a sage or the ordinary person. Then comes the difference. The ordinary man says, my action has been praised by society. My action has been praised by society. So the sense of pleasure is accompanied by a sense of pride. And if the actions continue to be accepted by society, in the case of an ordinary person, believing that the actions are his actions, the pride continues and gives rise to arrogance. In the case of a sage, sense of pleasure arises, but knowing that it is not his action that has been praised, knowing absolutely, totally, that the action which has been approved and praised by society is not his action, how can there be a sense of pride? So in the case of a sage, sense of pleasure, but not pride. In the case of an ordinary person, the sense of pleasure is accompanied by pride and arrogance. Now let us take another extreme. An action happens which is disapproved by society. It's a bad action. It has hurt the sentiments or the person of number of people. It's a bad action. Again, The disapproval of the society is an input in the two body-mind organisms, one that of a sage and the other that of an ordinary person. In both, the disapproval of the society is the input, and the mechanical or biological reaction and output is a sense of regret. A sense of regret that an action has happened which has hurt some people and is therefore disapproved by society. A sense of regret. That will be in both cases as a mechanical or biological reaction. But in the case of an ordinary person, the sense of regret, because he thinks it is his action which has been disapproved by society, the sense of regret will be accompanied by a sense of guilt or shame. A sense of guilt or shame will follow the sense of regret. But in the case of a sage, sense of regret, of course, but knowing absolutely that it was not his action which had been disapproved by the society, why should he feel a sense of guilt? So the sense of regret in both cases, but in the case of a sage, no guilt, no shame, it's not his action. Whereas in the case of an ordinary man, there will be a sense of guilt and shame. And usually the actions which happen through any body-mind organism scale the range from approval to disapproval by society, pride and arrogance to guilt and shame. And that is really an enormous load which an ordinary person carries. The sense, the load of a sense of pride and arrogance and guilt and shame combined is an enormous load for actions which happen through his own body-mind organism. The sage is free of this load of sin and guilt, pride and arrogance. Now, about actions which happen through other people, other body-mind organisms. An action someone hates me. I can't prevent that. So he would like to do me considerable harm. And he succeeds. And he is happy, at least temporarily, that he has hurt me. So, what happens to me? The me is still the ego without the sense of personal doership. Even in the case of a sage, the ego without the sense of personal doership continues merely as identification with a name and form. It has to, otherwise the body-mind organism will not function. So, the body-mind organism which has been hurt has to accept the hurt as part of the misery of living. So the sage accepts the hurt as part of God's will and the destiny of that particular body-mind organism. The sage accepts the hurt, but not as something done by someone. The hurt has happened because according to God's will, this body-mind organism was supposed to be hurt, and the hurt has happened. But knowing absolute conviction that if it were not God's will that that this body-mind organism should be hurt, I repeat, the sage knows totally that if it were not God's will that that body-mind organism was supposed to be hurt, no power on earth could hurt him. That is the total understanding. No power on earth can hurt me if it were not God's will. So what has hurt me is God's will and not the action which someone thinks he has done. He may think he has done the action. He may be happy that I have been hurt. But I know that no action from anybody can do anything to me. So with that understanding, how can a sage hate anybody? How can a sage be jealous of anybody? So, for actions which happen through his own body, mind, organism, the sage does not carry a load of pride, arrogance, guilt and shame. And for actions which happen through other body, mind, organisms, which have effect on him, which have consequences on himself, there is no load of hate and jealousy and envy. So what I would tell the ego is, so imagine your life with the hurts and miseries that are your allotted share according to God's will, without the load of pride and guilt and hatred and jealousy and envy. Without this load, would you not be comfortable with yourself? Without this load of pride and guilt and shame, would you not be comfortable with yourself? And without the load of hatred and jealousy for anyone in this world, would you not be comfortable with others? You see? So with this acceptance, no one is the doer. I am comfortable with myself without the load of pride and guilt and shame, and I am comfortable with others without the load of hatred and jealousy and envy. So life goes on, gives me my destined share of pain and pleasure. So I accept my destined share of pain and pleasure without this awful load. The result of which is that I am comfortable with myself and I am comfortable with others, and I enjoy the peace of nirvana while living in the life of misery. I enjoy the shanti of nirvana while living in the samsara of dukkha. That is my basic understanding, conceptual understanding. The ego still has a question for me. The ego still has a question for me. The ego says, okay, all right, I'll accept your guarantee, conceptual guarantee, that if I'm able to have this total acceptance that there is no doer in this world, that all doing, again according to the words of Buddha, if I'm able to accept that events happen, deeds are done, but there is no individual doer thereof. That is the Buddha. Events happen, deeds are done, but there is no individual doer thereof. If I am able to accept that, then I shall accept your assurance that I shall be able to live my life, the samsara of dukkha, with the shanti of nirvana. But how do I get that acceptance? You tell me, I think you are an honest man, but you yourself tell me that it's a concept. So my acceptance would still be intellectual. How do I get what you said, the total, absolute, deepest possible conviction, which goes far, far more than an intellectual conviction? So I tell the ego, that's a fair question. And my answer to that is, what is a concept for you? I tell the ego. I never fight with the ego, because that is exactly what he wants. The tougher the fight, the stronger he becomes. And he really doesn't know what to do with someone who accepts him. So I accept the ego. And I tell the ego, look, you're quite right. What you have said is correct. What I tell you is a concept. And that concept for you can only be the truth for you only if you test it from personal experience. So what is a concept at the moment? A most acceptable concept, which takes away this load of guilt and pride and hatred and jealousy. But I accept that only intellectually. So my answer to that is, to the ego, the only way what at the moment is a concept can become the truth only for you. The concept can never be the truth. But a concept can be the truth for you only if you test it from your own personal experience. Think for a moment of any number of actions in the past which have considered your actions. Investigate them. Find out, how did the actions happen? Did I decide to do something and did I do it? Or something led to that action? If there is something which led to those actions in my experience over which I had no control, then how can I call those actions my actions? If something led to those actions, then they are not my actions. That is from the experience, from the past experience. But the past experience is still past experience and a hazy experience. So the experience has to be in the present time. So my suggestion to the ego, in fact, all spiritual practices, is a real joke that some of the masters have said, all your spiritual practice must be directed towards the destruction of the ego. And who is to do these spiritual practices? The ego. So the ego may not say it, but the ego says, is he crazy? He asks me to do something which will kill me. Why should I do something which is going to kill me? And that is the question the ego is going to ask me. Why should I do something which is to investigate my actions and find out if they are my actions? And if I come to the conclusion that they are not my actions, then what will happen to me? So my answer to that is, I assure you that even if you come to the final conclusion from personal experience that you have not been the doer, that you are not the doer, nobody is a doer, you will not only not die, but I guarantee that you will live as long as the body-mind organism is alive. You will not only live as long as the body, mind, organism is alive, but you will live with that sense of peace which guarantees that you are comfortable with yourself and comfortable with others, meaning peace. So you will not only live as long as the body lives, but you will live with a tremendous sense of peace. All right, the ego says, I accept your word. What exactly do you want me to do? So I tell the ego, it's very simple. All you have to do, and that is the only spiritual practice, if you would deign to call it a spiritual practice, call it. But I would hesitate to call it a spiritual practice. But supposing you call it that, I would say that is the only spiritual practice I would recommend. If you are busy during the day, at the end of the day, sit back for 10, 20, 30 minutes, think of any action which you are absolutely convinced is your action. And take 2 or 3 if you like. Find out, investigate, make an investigation, make an analytical investigation into any action which happened as recently as today, not in the past. Investigate those actions. Find out how did that action happen. Did you decide to do it and did it? Or more likely, your investigation will tell you that a thought came to you which led to a deed which you consider your action. So your action really depended on that thought which came to you. And that thought you did not create. It has been proved in the laboratory by the scientists that a thought which happens half a second before the ego takes hold of that thought as his thought. The quantum physicist explains it as follows. Last year there was a physicist sitting in the... So I said, Professor, please listen and tell me what I say. I'm not a scientist, but as a scientist, would you say that is correct? So I told him, my understanding of it is this, that among the thousands and thousands of probabilities, that is what the scientists call, not possibility, but probabilities. Among the thousands of probabilities at any moment, one probability collapses and becomes a thought. And that is half a second before the ego accepts it as my thought. And the professor, to my sense of pleasure and gratification, said, absolutely correct. I said, thank you, Professor. You see? So, a thought which leads to my action is totally out of my control. So if I do some action, the cause of it was a thought over which I had no control. Do I really have the right to call it my action? So what caused that action may have been a thought, or it may be something I saw or I heard. That also is not in my control. So every time you do the investigation honestly and thoroughly, you will come to the conclusion that what you thought was your action was preceded by an event over which you had no control. Therefore, you cannot truly call it your action. And when the ego comes to this conclusion, time after time, action after action, day after day, that no action is his action. The ego is compelled to ask himself or herself the question, if this me is not needed for an action to happen, obviously no you or him or her is necessary for actions to happen through other body-mind organs. So if this me is really not necessary for life to happen, who is living this life? And this question can be sheer misery. That question will not allow the ego any bit of peace. Therefore, I am inclined to call this stage in the ego's search for peace a continuous misery, the night. It's the, what is the dark night of the soul. Thank you. I'm inclined to call it the dark night of the soul. Some time ago, a Buddhist monk, an Australian Buddhist monk, 20 years, shaven head, proper Buddhist monk, but very, very nice. It's not right that I call it a very nice person. So he was there for 3 days, and when I mentioned this, that the dark night of the soul, he sat up and he said, do you know, it's curious. Among the Buddhists, there is a word for it too. And he gave the word, which I forget, according to the presumably Pali language. But he translated it as horrors. Exactly the same thing. I said dark night of the soul, and in the Buddhist it says horrors. Until the answer comes to him, the intensity of this question, if the me is not necessary, is there a me at all? Me in this body or any other body? Is there a me at all? Then the answer comes from the source. My dear child, there never has been a me in any body. The suffering is unnecessary. All deeds are my deeds. I am the doer. I am and can be the only doer. And when this answer comes from the source, it becomes the truth for that ego. Not for anyone else. For everybody else, it still remains a concept. Until this spiritual practice is gone through, and to be able to go through that spiritual practice, this analytical investigation, a thorough and honest investigation, even the happening of that thorough and honest investigation is not in your control. That can happen only if it is the will of God. But at this stage, the compassionate Ramana Maharshi assures the spiritual seeker no need for frustration. Your head is already in the tiger's mouth. There is no escape. Meaning, you are interested in this search for truth, and you didn't start the seeking. The seeking happened because it was God's will. So if what you are seeking, call it peace, call it being comfortable, whatever, if that seeking was not started by you, and that seeking was started by the source, why do you bother with the progress of the seeking? Let the power which started the seeking deal with the seeking. Who cares? Then the peace will be all the more strong. Something wrong?
ask what it was. It's knocking on your button. Sorry, Ramesh. I'll button you up if you don't mind.
So, I've told you how you can have the peace of nirvana while living in the life of misery. And the bottom line is that will happen only if it is God's will. So you will send me the written questions. But now, do you have any questions? At the moment, from what I have said so far, are there any questions?
I have a question about concepts.
Yes.
You say the sage knows he's not a doer. But
I'm very sorry, but I can't hear you. Could you come a little forward? Yes.
can I sit here?
Yes, good.
I have a question about concepts.
I think that's not a bad idea, Indra. Give your chair to whoever wants to ask the question. Yes, please.
You said the sage knows. You said the sage knows he's not a doer.
The sage knows that he is not
Yeah.
the doer. Yes.
But that's a fact for you.
I'm sorry?
That's a fact for you, for the sage.
That is something which the sage would be prepared to accept a truth test.
My problem is, you say all those nice statements. There's no free will.
Yes.
All is predestination.
Yes.
There's no doer.
Mm-hmm.
That was of a great relief for me when I read your books. But now you said those are all concepts, and I think, wow, isn't that the truth? But as far as I see, you mean to say these are concepts for the one who hasn't the understanding, like me. I have only an intellectual understanding, but it's the truth for the sage. Is that?
Well, you see, what happens is this. It is a concept. But sometimes what happens is the words are reached by the mind, the intellect. And the mind says, this is a concept. How do I know it's the truth? But sometimes the words reach straight to the heart without the intervention of the mind. You see, it is the mind which asks, is this the truth? The heart doesn't ask. The heart knows it's the truth. You see, so all this spiritual practice which I recommend is for the concept to go down from the mind to the heart. And mind and the heart are both concepts.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Sorry, I need translation in English. I need translation in English.
Any
Possible?
volition?
Yes, translation.
Oh, you want a translation?
Yes.
In a Heiner demand for a translation.
Please. Spanish and
Yes,
English.
of course.
Spanish and English.
Yes, but you want.
Sorry, a little.
All right. No. Yes, you talk in German,
Okay.
he'll translate.
All right. Yes,
So you don't, yes.
Okay.
No, she doesn't need it. She is going to say it in German to you.
Spanish.
Oh, and you know Spanish. So,
No, we are from Spain.
so she doesn't need the mic. She is talking to you.
Yeah.
You need the mic for us. So you keep the mic, let her tell you what she wants to say, and you translate it. Simple, you see.
Okay, first she want to give you the her love and the family love.
Thank you very much. I do appreciate it.
She read from Maharaj, from Nisargadatty Maharadje,
yes.
that everything that she believes doesn't exist.
Everything she believes is
It doesn't exist.
does not. It's a concept. That's what I mean. It's a concept.
Yeah, because it's a concept. Yep. And everything that you don't believe it is. Something like that. You say. I'm going
I
to.
notice you are not satisfied with the translation.
Yes. I don't know how to translate that. I said that everything that you believe.
Wait a minute.
Okay. You just.
Oh, you heard her. Great. Yeah.
Says that everything that you don't believe is the truth.
You see, the truth is only one thing. The only one truth, as far as I'm concerned, and that is the impersonal awareness of being. That is the only truth. You see. And the working truth, there is a working truth for me, and that is, thy will be done. I'm not the doer. The source is the only doer. Events happen, deeds are done, but there is no individual doer thereof. That is the supplementary truth. The one truth is that which no one can deny. I am. The impersonal awareness of being is the only truth. And the moment one thinks or talks about it, even the truth has become a concept. You see? So, shall we make that the last question? Then you can send me your questions in writing and we'll make that the basis for tomorrow's talk.
Speaking about misery and suffering,
Yes.
what about the suffering for compassion?
Compassion arises out of watching the suffering.
Yes, but how can you how can you cope with it?
You can, you see, so your question really is, what can I do?
Not to suffer for compassion.
So if compassion arises, what do I do? Is that your question? Isn't it? If compassion arises, what do I do? That is the question, isn't it?
Yes, not to suffer. How can I not suffer for compassion?
Well, the answer is very simple. If compassion arises, do whatever you can for the person for whom you feel compassion. Do whatever you can for that person who is suffering, whose suffering has raised the compassion in you. Do whatever you can. You see? But if you think you are the doer, then you will say, I wish I could have done more. So you suffer because you are not in a position to do more. You see? But if compassion arises, naturally the compassion, without your even thinking, will turn into an action. that action which was possible for you to do. Let compassion arise and result in whatever action that happens. Then you will truly know that it is not your action.
Thank you.
Good. So, shall we say good night?